Hi, welcome to the podcast by Dr. Sushma Singh. Let us start conversation on Unit 17, Education, Expansion and Growth. And our topic is Medieval period. This period can be traced back to about the 12th century AD. Muslim invaders repeatedly invaded during this period, and it resulted in Islam taking firm roots in India. Political instability due to repeated invasions and aggressions adversely affected the existing education system. During this period, the education system underwent far reaching changes. Madrasas and maktabs were opened to impart education. Madrasas, which in Arabic mean schools, were the institutions of higher learning. They function even today as theological seminaries and Islamic law schools. The curriculum would be centered on the study of the Quran, Hadith, Arabian grammar, logic, languages, etc. The study of Islamic jurisprudence was stressed. The maktabs were Muslims' elementary schools that made the students competent to read the religious text. Elementary knowledge of writing, grammar, etc. was also imparted to the young children. Instructions were imparted mainly orally in maktabs and madrasas. Memorization of Islamic text was emphasized. The wealthy people of the society would fund these educational institutions. Theological consideration dominated educational institutions like madrasas and maktabs. Education during this period is said to have had an excessive theological bias. This was probably due to the bias of the rulers who patronized the education during this period and the ulema who controlled the educational scenario towards the theological aspects. The emphasis was thus on religious issues, although the main goal was to do away with the illiteracy and advance knowledge. This trend resulted in nurturing madrasas that were essentially schools of theology with auxiliary linguistic studies. These institutions provided a steady supply of qazis, muftis, and other experts in jurisprudence and administration for the state. During medieval India too, poets, scholars, and philosophers were greatly respected and patronized by the rulers, and some from abroad visited India. During the time of Firoz Shah, Tughlaq, and the Sikandar Lodi, special interest was taken in education and renowned madrasas as seats of higher learning were opened. Thereafter, the Mughal period started in India with Babur as the first Mughal emperor. The Mughal period extended from the early part of the 16th century and extended till the middle of the 19th century. The Mughal emperors too were interested in providing education to their subjects. They patronized learned men and institutions of learning. During the Mughal period, the credit for organizing education on a systematic basis goes to Akbar. He opened a large number of schools and institutions of higher learning for both Hindus and Muslims. He even introduced certain curricular reforms. The curriculum emphasized besides theological aspect, also the study of science, history, geometry, mathematics, etc. He also opened educational institutions for his Hindu subjects, where Sanskrit, its grammar, Vedanta, literature, etc. were taught. The need for moral education was also emphasized. During this period, many Hindus joined Islamic institutional centers and learnt Persian, since it was the language used for judicial purposes. Aurangzeb opened many madrasas and maktabs, and scholarships were paid in his time to the poor but deserving students. During the Mughal period, even when it flourished and reached its peak, education was still not recognized as a tool for national development, and the collapse of the Mughal Empire brought with it the ruins of educational system. Development in science and literature, both among Hindu and Muslims, had taken a back seat. There was almost moral anarchy, as testified to by the acquisition of power by the British in Bengal and the subsequent conversion of India into a colony. It was more a phase of treason, treachery, and open rivalry for power. This had started with the death of Aurangzeb, and education as a system started losing its vigor towards the close of the 18th century. What remained was the indigenous system of education with tolls and madrasas, imparting Hindu and Arabic education respectively. The infrastructure of the educational institutions that were usually single teacher schools was often poor, and learning was mostly in the open. The notable change was that the role of teacher was no longer the monopoly of Brahmins all over India. In Bengal, for instance, the members of other upper caste too taught in schools for Hindu children. But in institutions of higher learning, Brahmins still continued as teachers. Education in this period mainly comprised the study of texts, investigative studies, experimentations. Scientific studies were not given importance. Since Persian remained the court language, many Hindu boys too learned it. Mainly mathematics, grammar, literature, religious text, languages were taught. Illiteracy was widespread among the people belonging to the lower caste. Here we wind up this conversation, and thank you so much for choosing this podcast.